"Protect my son, I'll be yours," the Apache woman said. The rancher's reply shocked all. The sun had barely risen over the Arizona desert when Thomas Caldwell stepped out onto the wooden porch of his small ranch house. The air was dry and sharp, carrying the scent of sagebrush and dust. He had lived on this land for more than 20 years, carving a life out of the rough earth with nothing but hard work and stubborn determination. He had lost his wife a few years back, and since then his life had been quiet, almost lonely, except for the horses and cattle that needed constant attention. Caldwell was a tall man with broad shoulders and strong hands that told the story of years of labor. He was respected by the few neighbors who lived scattered across the territory, but he was also known for being a man who kept to himself. He didn't make friends easily, and he didn't care much about the gossip of the town. His focus was on the land, the ranch, and keeping things in order. Life was simple, predictable, and safe, until the day it changed. It started with a commotion near the edge of his property. Caldwell had just finished checking the fence along the northern boundary when he heard the sound of shouting. He tensed immediately, hand going to the rifle resting against the porch post. Raiders were not uncommon in this part of Arizona, though they were mostly small groups looking to steal cattle or scare settlers away. Caldwell's mind raced as he scanned the horizon. Dust clouds were rising near the tree line, and in the distance he could see figures moving quickly. As he rode toward the disturbance, he noticed something unusual. There were no armed men shouting or waving weapons. Instead, there was a woman, running with purpose, carrying a small boy clinging to her side. Her face was streaked with dirt and worry, her hair tangled from the wind. She was alone, except for the boy, who looked no older than 8, his wide eyes filled with fear and confusion. Caldwell slowed his horse, unsure what to do. The woman stopped a few feet away from him, panting heavily. She held the boy close and looked at Caldwell with an intensity that made him pause. Her voice was steady even in the middle of chaos, and yet it carried a desperation that was impossible to ignore. "Protect my son," she said. "I have no one else. I will be yours." Caldwell's eyes narrowed. He had heard strange requests in his life, but nothing like this. He didn't understand what she meant at first. Be hers? What was she asking of him? And why should he trust her? His mind raced with questions, but when he looked at the boy standing frozen beside her, he felt a tug of something he hadn't felt in years: compassion. The boy was small, with dark hair and skin tanned by the sun. His eyes darted between Caldwell and his mother, unsure of what to do. He seemed terrified, and Caldwell could see the fear of abandonment in him. He realized slowly that the woman was not asking for himself. She was asking for the boy's life, his safety, and she was offering herself somehow in return. Caldwell dismounted his horse carefully, keeping his hands visible. "I don't understand," he said, his voice cautious. "Why come to me? Why not stay hidden?" The woman shook her head, brushing strands of hair from her face. "I cannot stay. Raiders are coming. If I hide him alone, they will take him. I have no one else who can keep him safe. Please, I beg you." Caldwell felt the weight of her words. His mind went to the dangers that surrounded them. The desert was harsh, the law scarce, and the tension between settlers and the Apache tribes in this region was well known. Its people on both sides had been hurt before, and mistrust ran deep. But looking at the boy, he felt something that had been buried under years of solitude: responsibility. Maybe even the start of a bond he didn't know he wanted. "Bring him here," Caldwell said finally, stepping closer. The woman hesitated for a moment but then handed the boy to him. Taya clung to Caldwell's arm at first, trembling. Caldwell knelt down, speaking softly. "It's all right, little one. You're safe now." The boy's eyes widened, a mix of fear and confusion, but he didn't resist. Caldwell felt the weight of the child in his arms and realized how small and fragile he was. He had grown up alone for much of his life, and the idea of taking care of a child seemed overwhelming, almost impossible. Yet, he couldn't turn away. The woman, Ahioka, took a step back, watching Caldwell carefully. "I will stay close," she said. "I will do whatever you ask. But you must promise my son must survive. He is all I have left." Caldwell straightened, holding Taya close. "I will protect him," he said, his voice firm. "You can trust me." For a moment, there was silence between them, the kind that carried more weight than words. The wind blew across the desert and dust swirled around their boots. Caldwell could see the strain in Ioka's eyes, the lines of worry and exhaustion. He realized how desperate she must have been to hand over her child to a stranger in the middle of nowhere. Word spread quickly. By the time Caldwell and Taya returned to the ranch, a few neighbors had gathered, whispering and pointing. "Why would he take an Apache boy?" one asked. "That could bring trouble to his doorstep." Caldwell ignored the gossip, focusing on the immediate task, sheltering the boy, giving him food and water, and ensuring he was safe. He made a small bed for Taya in the corner of the main room and watched as the boy finally relaxed enough to eat. There was a quiet courage in Tay that surprised Caldwell, a determination to survive despite the fear in his eyes. Over the next few hours, Caldwell and Ahioka talked quietly outside. She explained the dangers that had forced her to leave her home, the raids that had taken others from her tribe, and the risks that lingered in every direction. Caldwell listened, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. He understood, in a way he hadn't before, the sacrifices a mother would make for her child. As the sun climbed higher, Caldwell realized that his life had changed forever. He had accepted a responsibility he had never sought for a child who was not his own. He didn't know what the future would hold. He didn't know if the town would accept this choice, or if he would be able to protect the boy against dangers that came from all sides. But he also knew that for the first time in years, he felt a sense of purpose beyond his ranch, beyond his routine. That night, Caldwell sat by the fire, Tay asleep in the corner, and thought about the woman's words, "I will be yours." It was not a literal promise of love or marriage, but a promise of trust, of survival, of hope. Caldwell understood that this small child represented more than just innocence. He represented a connection between two worlds, a chance to do something brave and right. And somewhere deep inside, Caldwell felt a quiet sense of pride. He had chosen not just to survive, but to act with courage when it mattered most. The desert around him was still harsh, the land still unforgiving, but for the first time in a long time, Caldwell felt that he was part of something bigger than himself. He did not yet know the challenges that awaited him, the struggles with neighbors, the difficulties of raising a boy from a culture so different from his own, or the dangers that lurked beyond the horizon. But he knew one thing clearly: Taya would not face them alone. He would protect this child, and in doing so he might find a kind of life he had never imagined for himself. The night grew quiet. Stars sparkled above the desert, endless and unchanging. Caldwell watched over Tay, thinking about the future, about the trust that had been placed in his hands. and about the strange twist of fate that had brought this small boy and his mother into his life. He did not yet know what the coming days would bring, but he knew that his choice had set a new path, one of courage, responsibility, and a bond that would not be easily broken. And for the first time in many years, Thomas Caldwell felt that he was exactly where he needed to be. Life on the ranch changed quickly after Caldwell had taken Tay under his care. The boy was quiet at first, watching Caldwell closely, unsure if this stranger could really be trusted. Caldwell, in turn, had to learn patience he hadn't needed in years. Every day brought new challenges. Feeding the boy, making sure he learned to do simple chores, and keeping him safe from dangers in the territory. All of it required a careful balance. Taya was not an easy child to understand. He had grown up in the Apache way, surrounded by lessons of survival and respect for nature, and everything Caldwell had known about ranching and town life was different. Sometimes the boy would refuse to eat what Caldwell offered, or disappear into the shadows, hiding when he thought no one was looking. Caldwell had to remind himself constantly that the boy's behavior was not defiance, but fear and confusion. The townspeople did not make things easier. Rumors spread quickly that Caldwell had taken an Apache boy, and some people questioned his judgment. A few neighbors came by, offering advice that was more criticism than help. "You shouldn't be doing this, Caldwell," one man said bluntly, leaning against the fence. "He doesn't belong here. You're asking for trouble." Caldwell had only listened quietly, nodding, saying nothing. He knew that no argument would change their minds. If he wanted to protect Taye, he would have to do it on his own. Ahioka visited when she could. She never stayed long, knowing the town's eyes were everywhere, but she would bring small gifts for her son, a carved wooden animal, a piece of cloth, or sometimes just a quiet word of comfort. Taye would always run to her, hugging her tightly before turning back to Caldwell. Caldwell observed these visits with mixed feelings. He respected her bravery and the love she carried for her son, but each visit reminded him that he was not replacing her. He was only protecting what she could not in that moment. The first real test of Caldwell's resolve came one afternoon when a small group of local men came to the ranch. They had heard the rumors and were determined to see Caldwell give up the boy. Caldwell was in the corral, teaching Tay to feed the horses, when the men arrived, their boots kicking up dust. "You're asking for trouble, Caldwell," one of them said, stepping closer. "That boy doesn't belong here. Give him back to his mother, or wherever he came from, before someone gets hurt." Caldwell did not flinch. He stood tall, his hands resting on the fence. "He is safe here," he said quietly but firmly, "and he will stay safe. You don't have to like it, but it's my decision." The men laughed nervously, not expecting resistance. One of them sneered. "You're asking for trouble. You'll regret it." Caldwell met his gaze steadily. "I have lived my life making my own choices," he said. "This is one of them. I will not be intimidated. Now leave, before I make you leave." The men hesitated, sensing the seriousness in his tone. After a moment, they muttered under their breath and walked away, leaving Caldwell and Tay alone in the quiet corral. Taya looked up at him, eyes wide. "Will they come back?" he asked, his small voice trembling. Caldwell knelt and placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. "Maybe," he said honestly. "But you don't have to worry. I won't let anyone hurt you." The boy nodded slowly, feeling some comfort in Caldwell's words, even if fear still lingered. Days passed, and Caldwell realized he had to teach Taye more than just chores. He had to teach him how to live safely in a world that could be harsh and unforgiving. Caldwell began to show Taya how to handle tools, care for animals, and protect himself. He taught him about the ranch, the land, and the ways of settlers, but he also began to learn from Taya. The boy's knowledge of the land, his understanding of plants, tracks, and weather was impressive. Caldwell noticed that survival skills Tay had learned from his mother could keep them both safer. One evening, as the sun set behind the mountains, Caldwell and Tay sat outside the small house, watching the sky turn shades of orange and red. Tay pointed to a group of birds flying overhead. "They are coming back to the water," he said. "If you watch the sky, you can see where the rain is." Caldwell listened, impressed by the boy's insight. He realized that Taya's knowledge, though different from his own, was valuable. They were learning from each other, slowly building trust and respect. But even with these quiet moments of peace, danger was never far. The desert was full of threats, wild animals, harsh weather, and the occasional band of raiders. Caldwell had to stay vigilant, often riding long hours to check the fences, the water supply, and the surrounding land. Tay would follow when he could, learning to ride the horse, to read the land, and to notice the signs of danger. Each day the boy grew more confident, and Caldwell felt a growing pride in his progress. One afternoon, a scout from a nearby settlement arrived, bringing news of a raiding party moving through the region. Caldwell felt a familiar tension rise in his chest. He knew that if the raiders came too close, it would not only be dangerous for the ranch, but for Taya as well. He took the boy inside and closed the doors securely. Caldwell worked quickly to fortify the ranch, moving supplies and weapons where they could be used in case of an attack. Taya watched anxiously. "Will they find us?" he asked. Caldwell knelt beside him. "We'll do everything we can to stay safe," he said. "You are not alone. I'm here, and I won't let anything happen to you." The boy leaned against him, finally feeling a sense of security he hadn't known in weeks. When the raiding party passed nearby without stopping, Caldwell felt a mixture of relief and pride. They had survived the first real test together. Caldwell realized that his decision to protect Taya was not just about keeping him alive. It was about teaching him how to face life with courage, even when the world seemed unfair and dangerous. As weeks turned into months, Caldwell and Tay developed a quiet routine. I learned the daily tasks of the ranch, how to care for animals, how to recognize the signs of weather, and even how to handle the small responsibilities of managing land. Caldwell taught him not with anger or strictness, but with patience, guiding him step by step. Ahioka continued her visits, bringing news from her tribe and small gifts for her son. Each time, Caldwell would step back and watch the connection between mother and son, understanding that his role was not to replace her, but to protect what she loved. Tay would run to her, hug her tightly, and then return to Caldwell, the three of them forming an unusual but fragile bond of trust and care. One afternoon, while Caldwell and Tay were repairing a fence, a group of town children came by, curious and whispering about the Apache boy at the ranch. Some laughed, some looked wary, but Taya stood tall, showing confidence he hadn't had before. Caldwell noticed this and felt a swell of pride. The boy was learning not just survival, but courage, resilience, and the ability to stand up in the face of gossip and fear. By the end of the season, Caldwell realized that protecting Ty was changing him as well. He was softer, more patient, more aware of the world beyond his ranch. He had grown to see the boy as family, even though the bond was not defined by blood. The townspeople slowly began to notice the change too, some admiring Caldwell's determination, though most still whispered behind his back. And though the road ahead was uncertain, Caldwell knew one thing with clarity. He had made the right choice. Taya was safe, learning and growing. Caldwell was no longer just a rancher surviving in the desert. He had become a protector, a teacher, and a guardian. He had accepted responsibility for another life, and in doing so had found a sense of purpose that he had thought was lost forever. The desert stretched endlessly around them, harsh and unforgiving, but for the first time, Caldwell and Tay faced it together. Each sunrise brought new challenges, but also new lessons, and each day strengthened the bond between them. Caldwell knew that the future would hold dangers, judgments, and trials, but he also knew that they would face it side by side, and that knowledge brought him a quiet peace he had never known before. The summer sun blazed hot across the Arizona desert, turning the land into a canvas of gold and brown. Thomas Caldwell had become accustomed to the long hours of work, the constant vigilance required to keep the ranch and Tay safe. But the routine was about to be tested in ways he had not imagined. One morning, Caldwell awoke to a silence that felt unusual. The birds were absent, the wind had softened, and the desert seemed still in a way that made him uneasy. He walked to the corral to check on the horses and found Taye standing quietly, staring into the distance. Caldwell followed his gaze and noticed a small cloud of dust moving quickly along the ridge beyond the property. His heart tightened. Raiders. Caldwell had faced threats before, but this one felt different. The group was larger than the last he had encountered, moving with purpose and coordination. He could see the glint of metal from a distance, guns and knives carried by men who had no intention of leaving quietly. He quickly returned to the house and gathered Tay. "Stay close to me," Caldwell said, his voice steady but urgent. "We may have visitors today." Tay clung to Caldwell's hand, fear evident in his eyes, but he did not panic. He had learned to trust Caldwell, and that trust gave him courage. Caldwell led him to a small outbuilding at the edge of the ranch, one that could be secured with heavy wooden doors. He knew they would need to hide if the raiders tried to come onto the property. As they waited, Caldwell realized he needed more than just hiding to protect them. He needed a plan. He remembered the lessons Taye had taught him, the knowledge of the land, the signs of danger, and the ways of survival. Caldwell leaned down and whispered to the boy, "Do you remember what you told me about the birds and the wind?" Taya nodded. "Yes, they can tell us where people are moving, and if the wind changes, it can warn us." Caldwell smiled slightly. "Good. We will use what you know." They worked quietly, setting up barriers and listening intently. Caldwell felt a strange mix of fear and determination. He knew that if the raiders found them, it would not just be a fight for property. It would be a fight for Tay's life. The weight of responsibility pressed heavily on him. Hours passed, and the dust cloud moved closer. All the raiders were fresh with its pair. Caldwell and Tay remained hidden, watching carefully. Finally, the raiders appeared at the edge of the property, shouting and waving weapons. Caldwell's heart pounded, but he stayed calm. He knew that panicking would only put Taya at risk. The boy's knowledge proved invaluable. He pointed out a path behind some rocky outcrops that could give them an advantage if they needed to escape or defend themselves. Caldwell nodded, feeling a deep respect for the boy's sharp mind and courage. Together, they quietly moved to the new position, careful not to be seen. From their hiding place, Caldwell observed the raiders. They were rough men, intent on intimidation and theft. But Caldwell also noticed something unexpected. They were not careful, not as aware of the land as he and Tay were. He realized that with patience and strategy, they could protect themselves without direct confrontation. As the sun reached its highest point, one of the raiders spotted movement near the corral. He shouted, pointing at the outbuilding. Caldwell and Tay froze. holding their breath. The raider approached, but then paused, distracted by the noise of horses and the clatter of water buckets. Caldwell seized the moment. He whispered instructions to Tay, who moved silently to adjust the barriers, creating a small trap that would slow anyone who tried to come closer. The raider tripped and fell, causing a commotion that drew the attention of the others. Caldwell realized this was their chance. He guided Tae to a hidden path behind the rocks, away from the raiders. Step by step, they moved with care, using the knowledge of the land and the wind to stay unnoticed. Caldwell's heart raced, but he remained focused, knowing that Tae's safety depended on his calmness. Eventually, they reached a safer area, where the raiders could not easily follow. Caldwell paused, taking a moment to catch his breath and check on the boy. Tae's face was flushed, but his eyes shone with determination. Caldwell felt a swell of pride. The boy had faced fear and had acted with intelligence and courage. "We did well," Caldwell said softly. "You were brave." Tae smiled faintly. "I learned from you," he said. "I'm not alone anymore." Caldwell felt a quiet warmth in his chest. These words, simple as they were, meant more than any praise he had received in his life. He realized that protecting Tae was changing him too. He was no longer just a man managing a ranch. He was a teacher, a protector, and a guide. And he understood, more than ever, the importance of courage, trust, and the bond they were building. After the raiders eventually moved on, Caldwell and Tae returned to the ranch. The property was largely intact, thanks to their careful planning and quick thinking. Caldwell took a moment to inspect the fences, the animals, and the house, ensuring that everything was secure. Tae followed closely, eager to help and learn. That evening, Ahioka arrived. She had heard about the raiders from a passing traveler and had come immediately to check on her son. Seeing Caldwell and Tae safe, she felt a wave of relief. She approached them quietly, her eyes filled with gratitude and respect. "You kept him safe," she said to Caldwell. "I knew I could trust you." Caldwell nodded. "He is a brave boy," he replied. "We kept each other safe today." Ahioka looked at Taya, who was smiling despite the day's dangers. "You are growing strong," she said softly. "Your father, your protector, has taught you well." Taya looked at Caldwell with admiration. "I'm learning from both of you," he said. The bond between the three of them deepened that night. Caldwell realized that the danger had not only tested his abilities, but had also strengthened the connection between him and the boy. He understood that true protection was not just about guarding against threats. It was about teaching courage, providing guidance, and fostering trust. In the following days, Caldwell began to prepare for future challenges. He trained Tae in basic survival skills, teaching him how to move quietly, recognize signs of danger, and respond calmly under pressure. Tae absorbed these lessons quickly, his confidence growing with each day. Caldwell also took steps to strengthen the ranch, improving fences, securing supplies, and planning escape routes in case of another threat. The experience changed Caldwell in subtle ways. He became more patient, more observant, and more aware of the boy's needs and abilities. He also began to see the world differently, appreciating the wisdom that Tae and Ahioka brought into his life. Their knowledge of the land, the animals, and the people around them added depth to his understanding of the world. One evening, as Caldwell and Tae sat by the fire outside the ranch house, the boy asked, "Do you think they will come back?" Caldwell looked at him thoughtfully. "Maybe," he said, "but we are ready, and no matter what happens, we face it together." Tae nodded, feeling a sense of security he had not known before. He understood that Caldwell was more than a protector. He was a father figure, a teacher, and a friend. Caldwell, in turn, realized that he had grown attached to the boy in ways he had never anticipated. The responsibility he had once feared had become a source of pride, purpose, and connection. Weeks turned into months, and the ranch continued to thrive. Taya's confidence grew, and Caldwell's respect for the boy deepened. They faced small challenges, storms, wild animals, and occasional trouble from neighbors, but each experience brought them closer together. Caldwell also began to see a subtle change in the town. Some neighbors, initially suspicious and critical, started to acknowledge Caldwell's courage and integrity. Its stories of the boy's bravery and Caldwell's protective actions spread quietly, earning a reluctant respect from those who had doubted him. Through it all, Ahioka remained a presence in their lives. She continued to visit, offering guidance and support, but she also gave Caldwell space to raise her son as he saw fit. The three of them formed a delicate balance of trust, care, and shared responsibility. Caldwell understood that this bond was unusual, but it was genuine and strong, built on respect, love, and courage. By the end of the year, Caldwell realized that the turning point had come not from one dramatic act, but from the slow, steady building of trust and resilience. He and Taya had faced danger together, learned from each other, and grown stronger as a result. The experience had tested their courage, patience, and determination, but it had also created a bond that would endure through the challenges to come. Caldwell looked at Tay that night as the boy slept peacefully, exhausted from the day's lessons. He thought of Ahioka's words when she had first handed over her son. "Protect my son, I'll be yours." Caldwell understood now what she had meant. It was not a promise of love in the usual sense, but a pledge of trust, hope, and shared responsibility. He had accepted that pledge, and in doing so had changed both their lives forever. The desert stretched endlessly around them, harsh and unforgiving, but Caldwell no longer felt alone. He had Tay, a brave and clever boy and a quiet ally in Ahioka. Together they faced the future with courage, ready for the challenges that lay ahead. And Caldwell knew, deep in his heart, that he had chosen the right path, a path of protection, trust, and unbreakable bonds. Winter arrived slowly in the Arizona desert, softening the harsh sunlight and bringing cool nights that made the air feel crisp and clean. The ranch had survived the previous summer's threats, but Caldwell knew the challenges were never truly gone. The territory was unpredictable, and even the quietest days could hide trouble. Taya had grown noticeably since the summer. He was stronger, taller, and more confident. The boy moved around the ranch with a sense of purpose, helping Caldwell with chores, feeding animals, and even checking the fences on his own. Yet, despite his confidence, Caldwell could see the boy's quiet moments of worry. Sometimes he would pause, staring at the distant horizon, thinking of the people and dangers that might still exist beyond the ranch. Caldwell understood those feelings. Fear was natural, but courage was learning to act in spite of it. Ahioka continued her visits. She had become a steady presence in their lives, though she never stayed long, understanding the watchful eyes of the town and the lingering mistrust between settlers and her people. Each visit was a reminder of the delicate balance Caldwell had created, protecting Taya, respecting Ahioka, and navigating the opinions of neighbors who still whispered about the Apache boy on Caldwell's ranch. One afternoon, a traveling merchant arrived, bringing news from nearby settlements. Caldwell listened carefully as the man described a series of thefts and small raids in the region. He frowned. These incidents were not unusual, but they were becoming more frequent and organized. Caldwell realized that his vigilance could not be occasional. It needed to be constant. Later that evening, Caldwell sat by the fire with Tay, thinking about the news. The boy had grown quieter, sensing the tension that Caldwell sometimes tried to hide. Caldwell placed a hand on his shoulder. "We need to be ready," he said, "not because I expect trouble here, but because it's better to be prepared than caught by surprise." Tay nodded. "I can help," he said. I know the land. I can watch and listen." Caldwell smiled. The boy's words reflected the growth he had seen over the past months. Teye was learning not just survival skills, but responsibility. He was becoming a partner in keeping the ranch and their lives safe. However, not everyone in town approved. Some neighbors began to resent Caldwell more openly. They whispered that harboring an Apache boy could bring danger or dishonor. One afternoon, a man named Riker approached the ranch, his expression hard and suspicious. "You're asking for trouble," he said, pointing at Taya. "You think raising that boy is some noble thing, but it's only going to bring misfortune." Caldwell remained calm. "He is my responsibility," he said firmly. "I will not abandon him, and I will not let anyone hurt him." Riker's lips tightened. "You're blind to the risk. You could lose everything, your land, your herd, even your life." Caldwell looked him directly in the eyes. "I have weighed the risk. I accept it, and I will do what is necessary to protect this boy." Riker walked away, muttering under his breath, leaving Caldwell and Tay standing in silence. The confrontation had been brief, but its weight lingered. Caldwell knew that standing up to the town was never easy, especially when their judgment was fueled by fear and prejudice. Yet he also knew that his responsibility to Tay was more important than public approval. The following weeks were filled with preparation and teaching. Caldwell trained Tye in ways to observe the land, recognize unusual signs, and respond calmly under pressure. They practiced moving quietly, reading the tracks of animals and people, and understanding the patterns of weather. Caldwell realized that Tay's Apache heritage, once a source of tension, was now an advantage. The boy's knowledge added depth to Caldwell's own understanding of the land and its dangers. Ahayoka visited during these weeks, offering her own lessons. She taught Taya about the plants that could provide food or medicine, how to find water in unexpected places, and ways to avoid danger without confrontation. Caldwell watched closely, learning from her as well. Together they formed an unusual but effective partnership. Caldwell protected the boy, Ayoka provided guidance, and Taye learned to navigate the world between the two of them. Yet the pressures of town life were never far away. Caldwell received letters from neighbors questioning his decisions, and sometimes small acts of sabotage occurred. Tools would go missing, fences would be tampered with, and one morning several cows were found sick under mysterious circumstances. Caldwell suspected that some of the townspeople disapproved of his choices and were testing his resolve. One evening, after repairing the fences, Caldwell spoke to Tei about the challenges they faced. "There will always be people who don't understand," he said, "but that doesn't mean we should give up. It means we must be careful, steady, and strong." Tei listened intently, absorbing every word. He had learned to trust Caldwell's judgment, and he had also begun to understand that courage was not just facing danger, it was standing firm in the face of criticism and opposition. The bond between Caldwell and Tay grew stronger as they faced these challenges together. Caldwell found himself more patient, more aware, and more willing to listen. Taya's confidence continued to grow, and he began to take initiative, suggesting solutions and ideas to keep the ranch safe. Caldwell admired the boy's quick thinking and resilience. Winter storms arrived gradually, bringing cold nights and occasional heavy winds that rattled the windows. Caldwell and Tay worked together to secure the house, the barns, and the animals. The harsh weather tested their endurance, but it also strengthened their teamwork. Caldwell began to see Tay not just as a child to protect, but as a partner in life, someone who could be relied upon in the harshest conditions. Ahioka's visits became a source of joy and comfort for both of them. She would bring news from her people, share stories of resilience, and remind Tay of his heritage. Caldwell observed these interactions with respect. He understood that the boy's identity was complex, and that protecting him meant honoring both his upbringing and his current life on the ranch. One night, a particularly strong windstorm blew across the desert. The house creaked, the trees bent, and the animals grew restless. Caldwell and Tay worked side by side, securing the animals and reinforcing doors. Tay's hands were steady, his movements deliberate. Caldwell realized how much the boy had grown, how much he had learned, and how much trust he had in the world around him. After the storm passed, Caldwell sat by the fire, exhausted but grateful. Tay curled up beside him, finally relaxed after the long night. Caldwell thought of the journey they had traveled together, from the moment Ahioka had entrusted her son to him, to the threats from neighbors, to the dangers of raiders, and now the challenges of weather and survival. He realized that protecting Ty had not just been about keeping him alive, it had been about teaching him courage, resilience, and wisdom. It had been about creating a bond built on trust, love, and shared experience. Caldwell understood now that the hardships they faced had strengthened them both, shaping a relationship that would endure for years to come. Ahioka returned briefly after the storm, her face showing concern and relief. She looked at Caldwell with gratitude. "He is safe," she said softly, "and he is learning. I see that you are giving him what he needs." Caldwell nodded. "He is brave," he said, "and he is learning from both of us." "I am lucky," he said. "I have both of you." Caldwell felt a warmth he had not known in years. The boy's words reflected the reality of their lives, 3 lives intertwined, each contributing to the others in ways that were quiet but powerful. Caldwell realized that this bond, unusual and unexpected, was one of the most important things he had ever been a part of. The winter continued, harsh at times, but also full of small victories. The ranch survived the storms, Tay grew stronger, and Caldwell became more confident in his role as protector and mentor. The challenges were far from over, but he knew that together they could face whatever came next. Caldwell often reflected on Ahioka's words from the first day she entrusted Taya to him. "Protect my son. I'll be yours." It had been a promise born of desperation, hope, and trust. Caldwell had accepted that promise, and in doing so had discovered a life richer and more meaningful than he had ever imagined. Through the struggles, the storms, and the challenges of winter, Caldwell realized that the true reward was not the survival of the ranch or the respect of the town. It was the growth, courage, and resilience of the boy he had promised to protect. And in return, he had grown as well, becoming more patient, understanding, and aware of the value of trust and love, even in the most difficult circumstances. The desert remained vast and unforgiving, but Caldwell no longer faced it alone. He had Taya, brave and clever, and Ahioka, wise and compassionate. Together, they had built something fragile but enduring, a bond that could survive judgment, hardship, and the harshest conditions. And Caldwell knew, deep in his heart, that this bond was worth every challenge, every sleepless night, and every risk he had taken. Wildflowers appeared along the edges of the ranch, and the air carried the scent of new life after the long winter. Thomas Caldwell walked through the fields with Tay, watching the boy carefully inspect the fences and the animals. The ranch had survived the storms, the raiders, and the disapproval of neighbors, and it now stood stronger than ever. Taya had grown into a confident young boy. He was tall for his age, strong and careful in everything he did. He had learned not just the work of the ranch, but also the lessons Caldwell had taught him about courage, patience, and responsibility. He understood that life could be harsh, but it was also full of hope and opportunity if faced with determination. Ahioka had returned after a long absence. She walked quietly across the yard, her eyes scanning the ranch with pride. She had seen Tay grow into a young boy who was strong, capable, and wise beyond his years. Caldwell met her gaze, and there was an unspoken understanding between them. They had both done everything they could to protect and guide him, and together they had succeeded. "You've done well," Ahioka said softly, kneeling to embrace Taye. "You are strong. You are ready." Taye hugged her tightly, a mixture of joy and relief in his eyes. "I learned from both of you," he said. "I am ready for whatever comes next." Caldwell watched quietly, feeling a sense of pride and quiet satisfaction. He had come to realize that protecting Taye had not just been about keeping him safe, it had been about shaping him into a young man who could face life's challenges with courage and intelligence. He had grown alongside Tay, learning patience, humility, and the value of trust in a way he had never known before. Life on the ranch continued, filled with work, lessons, and small joys. Caldwell and Tay worked side by side, tending the fields, caring for the animals, and preparing for the months ahead. Each day brought new tasks, but also a growing sense of security and routine. The bond between them had deepened, unspoken yet undeniable, built on shared experiences, challenges, and victories. The town had begun to notice the change as well. Some of the neighbors who had once whispered or questioned Caldwell's choices now looked upon the ranch with quiet respect. Stories spread about the boy's courage during the raiders' attacks and Caldwell's unwavering protection. Though not everyone approved, there was a growing recognition that Caldwell had acted with integrity, bravery, and compassion. One morning, Caldwell received a letter from a neighbor who had once criticized him. The words were careful, respectful, and even admiring. "You have shown strength," the letter said. "It is clear that the boy has thrived under your guidance. Your courage is known in the region." Caldwell held the letter quietly, a small smile on his face. It was not the praise he had sought, but it was acknowledgement that his choices mattered and had made a difference. Ahioka stayed longer this time, helping Taya with lessons about his heritage, the traditions of his people, and the importance of remembering where he came from. Caldwell observed them together, understanding that raising Taye required not only protection and guidance, but also respect for the boy's identity. He realized that Taya's strength came from the combination of both worlds, the discipline and skills learned on the ranch, and the wisdom and courage inherited from his mother. One afternoon, Caldwell and Tay were walking along the edge of the property when they saw a small group of wild horses in the distance. Tay's eyes lit up with excitement. "We should watch them carefully," he said. "They can teach us about the land and how to move safely through it." Caldwell nodded. The boy had grown observant and patient, qualities Caldwell had worked to instill over the months. Taya's ability to read the land and respond calmly to what he saw was a reflection of the lessons they had learned together. It was a moment of pride for Caldwell, realizing that Taya was becoming capable of independent thought and judgment. The seasons changed and the ranch flourished. Tay continued to learn and grow, now helping Caldwell make decisions about the land, the animals, and the safety of their home. Caldwell recognized that his role as protector had evolved into one of mentorship and partnership. He had guided Taye through danger and uncertainty, but now he could step back, confident that the boy was prepared for the future. Ahioka visited one final time before returning to her people. She had completed the lessons she wanted to give Taye, ensuring he understood his heritage, the skills he needed, and the courage to face life with confidence. She knelt and embraced Caldwell, gratitude in her eyes. "You kept him safe," she said quietly. "You did what I could not do alone. For that, I will always be thankful." Caldwell nodded. "He is brave," he said, "and he has learned well from you too." Taya hugged his mother one last time before she departed. He felt a mix of sadness and pride, knowing that she would always be part of his life, even from a distance. Caldwell stood quietly, watching the moment, understanding that their journey together had brought growth, courage, and resilience to everyone involved. Over the years, Caldwell and Tay continued to work together on the ranch. The boy became skilled in every aspect of ranch life, as well as in survival skills and the wisdom of the land. Caldwell taught him about honesty, integrity, and responsibility, while Taye shared knowledge from his heritage and instincts that had saved them both in dangerous moments. The town began to respect them quietly. While some still held prejudices, many recognized the strength of Caldwell's choices and the boy's abilities. Taye became known as a young man of courage and intelligence, a bridge between two worlds, and Caldwell quietly took pride in having guided him through such challenges. One evening, as the sun set across the desert, Caldwell and Tay sat outside, watching the sky turn shades of pink and orange. The land was peaceful, the animals calm, and the wind carried a gentle warmth. Caldwell reflected on the journey they had taken together, from the first moment Ahioka had entrusted her son to him, through the dangers of raiders, the struggles with neighbors, the harsh storms, and the lessons of survival. "I never imagined it would be like this," Caldwell said quietly. "I didn't think I could manage it, and yet here we are." Tay looked at him with a small smile. "Ah, you did more than manage. You taught me. Ah, you kept me safe. You helped me grow." Caldwell felt a deep sense of fulfillment. Protecting Taya had been difficult, filled with challenges and fears, but it had also been the most meaningful experience of his life. The boy had become more than just someone to protect. He had become family, and Caldwell knew that their bond would last a lifetime. As the stars appeared in the clear desert sky, Caldwell realized that the promise Ahioka had made, "Protect my son, I'll be yours," had been fulfilled in ways far beyond anyone's expectations. It was not a promise of love in the traditional sense, but a pledge of trust, courage, and commitment. Caldwell had honored that pledge, and in doing so, had discovered a life richer and more meaningful than he could have imagined. The desert stretched endlessly around them, harsh yet beautiful, but Caldwell no longer felt alone. He had Tay, brave, capable, and wise, and he had the knowledge that Ahioka's love and trust were always a part of their lives. Together they had faced danger, prejudice, and hardship, and they had grown stronger as a result. Caldwell understood now that the true reward of his actions was not recognition or approval, but the growth of Tay into a strong, confident young man, and the knowledge that he had made a difference in someone's life. That bond, forged in trust, courage, and shared experience, was unbreakable. And as Caldwell and Tay sat together watching the stars appear one by one, the ranch quiet around them, he felt a deep sense of peace. They had survived the trials of the land, the judgment of others, and the dangers of life in the desert. They had done it together, and in the process, they had created something lasting, something worth every sacrifice, every sleepless night, and every moment of fear and uncertainty. The story of Caldwell and Tay was not one of grand heroics or dramatic battles, but of quiet courage, steadfast protection, and unwavering trust. It was a story of growth, resilience, and the extraordinary strength that comes from human connection. And as the night settled over the desert, Caldwell knew that the journey they had taken together was only the beginning of a life built on care, courage, and love that transcended fear and prejudice. In the years to come, the ranch would continue to thrive, the boy would continue to grow, and the lessons learned in those difficult early days would guide them both. Caldwell had honored his promise. Taya had learned the strength of trust and guidance, and the bond they shared would remain unbroken.